Hello everyone, this video tells the story of engineer had been cheating with her and then blackmailed her and her parents to get her child back. It's really crazy and story. Your opinion in the comments, enjoy your viewing.
My husband cheated on me, then he and his parents blackmailed me to gain custody of our child, but I recorded a video showing. My relatives betrayed me in court, causing me to lose the custody of my child. Now they are seeking my assistance after my ex-spouse deceived them as well. I managed to record their confessions secretly. Hi, this is going to be lengthy because there is a lot of context necessary for everything to make sense. I, a 35-year-old woman, got divorced a few months ago, but it had been in progress for nearly a year. I met my ex-husband Daniel through mutual friends when I was 27, and after dating for 3 years, we decided to move in together and get married. His family was somewhat conservative and traditional and didn't approve of living together before marriage, so we had to get married if we wanted to stay together. I was really fond of Daniel, so I didn't see a problem with marrying him. My parents were also supportive of that decision, so we got married. Within 2 years of living together, I discovered I was expecting a child, and we were elated. It felt like our family was finally coming together and everything was falling into place. Unfortunately, when I announced my pregnancy, my in-laws began pressuring me to leave my job and focus on motherhood. It didn't help that my job had a very strict maternity leave policy, and since I hadn't been working there long, my leave would be particularly short. At the time, I considered the pros and cons and decided to resign from my job. It was not a decision I made alone, everyone was involved. Daniel and his parents kept insisting that it would be the best decision in the long run, and I just had to do it. Daniel seemed confident about everything and said he would take care of the family. He assured me that I didn't need to worry about finances and that he would provide enough. All I had to do was raise our child. My parents and my older sister also thought it would be best if I left my job and stayed at home because that's what my mother had done. Even though she had the option to return to work, she chose not to because raising children was her priority. I faced a lot of pressure from both families, so I decided to resign when I was in my second trimester. Everything had been going smoothly, and I had complete trust in my husband that he wouldn't let me down, which is why I left my successful career to be a stay-at-home mom. However, soon after my son was born, I noticed something odd about the way Daniel had been acting in the last few months of my pregnancy. I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but there was something off about his demeanor. Sure, he seemed happy when our son was born, and I thought things would return to normal, but instead, it got worse. He started being very irritable around me, and whenever I tried to talk to him, he would just snap at me. The only time he seemed happy and content was when he was with our son. Other than that, it always felt like he was annoyed to be at home with me, so he would spend long hours at work. Even on weekends, he would find excuses not to spend time with me. I just couldn't understand what was wrong, but I kept trying my best to make our marriage work because, unlike him, I loved him and didn't want to give up on us. This behavior continued for about 3 years after my son was born. He would stay at work much longer than necessary, and even when he was at home, he wasn't really present with me. I couldn't exactly complain because every time I tried to talk to him about it, he would just tell me he was exhausted from work and that being the sole provider for the household was not easy. It was insulting to me because it wasn't as though I was incapable of earning my own money, but I had to rely on him since he promised to make things easier for me. A few times, I even asked him if he would prefer if I went back to work so we could share the financial burden and he wouldn't have to handle all the pressure. He claimed that it would be an insult to him and his abilities. Besides, his parents would never approve, and we would face a tough time with them if I returned to work. So I continued staying at home and raising my son, which was pretty much the only thing that brought me joy because Daniel had changed, and he was no longer the man I married. It was just over a year ago that I discovered Daniel had been having an affair with one of his colleagues. Finding out was incredibly difficult for me because, honestly, I had been suspicious for a long time. I even snooped through his phone and laptop a few times while he was asleep, but I found nothing. I knew all his passwords because he wrote them down in his notebook, but even that didn't help. It almost felt like he had nothing to hide, and I felt foolish for even being suspicious. I even went through his belongings looking for a burner phone or something, but I found nothing. At one point, I actually started to believe that maybe I was just being paranoid and insecure. But fate was on my side, and I eventually saw the proof of his infidelity with my own eyes. Daniel and I were throwing a grand birthday party for our son about a year ago, and he had invited the colleague he was cheating with. She was a single mother with a son around our child's age, so I didn't find it strange that he invited her. He had also told me that she was a close friend of his, so I didn't find it unnecessary at all. After our son had cut his birthday cake, I decided to go to the upstairs bedroom because I wanted to change into something more comfortable for the party. But when I walked into my bedroom, I realized that my husband was already in there, and so was his colleague sitting on his lap. They were fully making out when I walked in on them, and it took me a couple of minutes to even process what I was seeing. First of all, it was my bedroom they were using, which was the most horrifying part. And secondly, they didn't even stop when they heard the door opening. I had to walk all the way over to them to make my presence felt for them to snap out of it. I'm pretty sure they thought it would be thrilling to make out in my bedroom in my house, but they probably didn't expect me to have a complete breakdown over it. I'm not proud of it, but knowing that my suspicions were actually true made something snap inside of me. I grabbed the colleague by her hair and started dragging her out of the room. I was unstoppable. From what I was told, Daniel is considerably stronger than me. But he couldn't stop me, and I don't even remember most of it because I think I had a rage blackout. I dragged her downstairs with Daniel right behind me and pushed her into the middle of the room while everyone was there. I don't remember most of what I said, but apparently I called her a bunch of derogatory names and told everybody what she and Daniel had been doing in my bedroom. I didn't even care that my son and a bunch of his friends were right there. Now that I look back on it, it's extremely embarrassing and inappropriate, but at the time, it felt justified. It didn't even cross my mind as I was screaming at the top of my lungs. My parents, my sister, and my in-laws were also present, and I think it was my father who finally calmed me down and took me back to my room. Once inside, I completely broke down and started crying uncontrollably. But instead of staying with me to comfort me, my dad locked me in the room and went back out. I should have known instantly that my parents didn't care about me. I'd always known they valued appearances more than being genuine, but this was just insane. Nobody came to check on me for the next few hours, and even after I had calmed down considerably, I had no idea what was happening outside. I didn't even have my phone, so I couldn't ask anyone. It was only after midnight that my brother escorted me out of the room. He didn't even ask how I was doing. They probably would have kept me in there longer if I hadn't started banging on the door like a maniac. When I came out, I asked my brother what had happened after I was locked in, and he told me that everyone had cleared out after my meltdown. He also mentioned that Daniel had left with his parents and our son, and the only people left in the house were my parents, my brother, and me. He let me out of the room so we could discuss what to do next. But my family's idea of a discussion meant telling me I had to apologize to all my guests for my behavior at the party. Not just that, but I also had to apologize to my in-laws and Daniel for what I did. They told me that Daniel had found it extremely difficult to convince his colleague not to press charges against me, because what I did was an act of physical violence against her. They said I owed it to him to talk and work things through instead of making this a big deal. I freaked out at them and told them to get out of my house because I wasn't going to let them stand under my roof and tell me I had to apologize to my cheating husband. I got into a huge fight with my family because they were telling me that I owed it to him to make things right and give this marriage a second chance, or else they would cut ties with me. I told them to go ahead because I had reached a point where I didn't care what anybody else thought of me. I was going to file for divorce and get out of this mess, and I didn't need anyone's permission for it. So I contacted a lawyer the next day and filed for divorce within a week of the incident. Daniel was served soon after, and he actually had the audacity to be disappointed and shocked. He came back home the day he was served with the divorce papers and demanded an explanation. I told him there was no way I was taking him back after what he had done and the way he had insulted me. We got into a nasty verbal argument where I said a lot of things to him and called him a lot of names. He ended up promising that I would never see my son again. But I didn't realize he would actually ensure he lived up to his words. Then the legal battle began. The divorce proceedings were easier and simpler compared to the custody battle since we had very few joint assets to divide. The house belonged to me, and there was no question about it because I had purchased it with my own money. Everything else was to be sold. and the costs would be split between us. We just had to wait for 6 months due to the waiting period in our state, and after that, once we reached a settlement, the divorce would be finalized. The only thing we couldn't agree on was the alimony that was due, because I had to start from scratch after he forced me to leave my job and I didn't have enough money of my own. He believed I shouldn't get any alimony at all, but that was not possible since he had promised to support me and make sure I never felt the need to work. Fortunately, I had a few texts to prove that, or else I might not have even received alimony. The divorce process was emotionally easier for me because I had already mentally disconnected from Daniel, but the custody battle is what really tore me apart because, unfortunately, my parents and my sister decided to betray me for money. My ex-husband and his lawyer were terrible people who started building a case against me, claiming I was a negligent and unstable mother, to prove that I was not capable of raising my son alone. So Daniel and his parents were supposed to get full custody. I assumed my parents and sister had been bought off by my ex-in-laws because they were very wealthy, and I couldn't think of any other reason they would turn on me. I'm pretty sure they started sucking up to my in-laws in the first place because of their money. Anyway, Daniel accused me of being unfit to raise our son and demanded full custody, claiming I was an alcoholic with severe anger issues. They fabricated several incidents where I supposedly lost my temper and put my son at risk. Of course, none of that ever happened, but they needed something to make me look like the bad guy. I thought at least some people would be on my side, but all my friends sided with him, probably due to my breakdown at my son's birthday party. The worst betrayal was when my parents and sister also testified against me in court, claiming I needed rehab and intensive therapy before I could be near my son. They suggested that my behavior was likely what drove Daniel to cheat on me because he was tired of dealing with me. Unfortunately, even though I fought hard with my lawyer, I was unable to get custody of my son. The odds were stacked against me, and there was very little I could do to change the outcome. My lawyer and I tried our best to gather evidence to prove I was a good mother, but it was all in vain. The verdict was announced a few months ago, and that was the last time I saw my son in person. I did get supervised visitation rights, but Daniel never lets me see him, so it's pretty much pointless. He is 4 years old now, but he barely gets to see me, and I'm constantly afraid he will forget about me as he grows up. From what I know from a few relatives who are still on my side, my family still gets to see him since they post pictures with my son all the time. Daniel and my son are still living with my in-laws, and basically, everyone gets to see him but me. I can't imagine anything more heartbreaking than that. I have been living solely on the memories of my son and myself, believing that at least Daniel is taking good care of him because I don't think I would have been able to provide him with a comfortable life on my salary since I'm just starting out. I managed to get a job at my friend's company, but it's a startup and they don't make much at the moment, so my salary is not what one would expect for a woman in her 30s. Even the other employees are all in their early 20s, just there for the experience. The experience is intended to help them move on to better opportunities. I do receive alimony every month, but it's not enough because I still have to maintain the lifestyle I was living before. I can't exactly live frugally and cut costs drastically, but this is all I have right now because of the significant gap in my resume. I had believed that once I got my act together, I would apply for shared custody again and maybe stand a chance. But an opportunity literally fell into my lap a couple of weeks ago when my parents reached out to me after months of not speaking, asking for my help. They needed me to bail them out because, surprisingly, Daniel was not the wonderful guy they had believed him to be. My sister sent me an email saying that I needed to come over to their place ASAP because they had realized something huge and wanted me to know. They were sick of hiding things from me and wanted to be part of my life again. I tried to ignore that email that day, but I couldn't stop thinking that maybe this would help me with my son. So I went over to their place in the evening. When I arrived, I expected them to be living lavishly because they had sold me out for money from my ex-in-laws. But if anything, they were living worse than before. My son was thrilled to see me, though, so that was the cherry on top of a fantastic evening. When I visited my family that day, they literally started begging for forgiveness as soon as I walked in the door because they realized how badly they had messed up. They knew there was no going back, but still wanted me to forgive them. After the divorce, when they approached my ex-in-laws and Daniel to ask about the money they had been promised, Daniel told them that was not happening anymore. Apparently, it had only been insinuated that they would be compensated handsomely if they turned against me and testified in their favor, but there was nothing in writing to prove it. If my family tried to backtrack and tell me about all of this, Daniel and his parents would ensure they never saw my son again. So, for the sake of my son, they decided to keep their mouths shut, even though they were not getting paid as promised. It got worse because they had been terribly used. Not only had they been manipulated to testify against me, but they were also being treated like free babysitters. Daniel would drop our son off at my parents' place every day, and they had to watch him while sacrificing their own time. It was highly inconvenient because even my father and sister had jobs to attend to, and my mother couldn't handle all the household work and looking after her grandson by herself because she was getting older. So either my father or sister would have to work from home every day, and it was becoming really difficult for them. That's why they contacted me to finally put an end to this. Apparently, they wanted to strike a deal with me and said that if I gave them the money my ex-in-laws promised them, they would take my side in court and make sure I got custody of my son. I was about to suggest this myself, but honestly, it was not surprising that they did it. My family had always been very materialistic, and even more so now that my father's business had failed and they were back to working jobs for other people. Obviously, they would want money more than ever now, because my father wanted to retire but didn't have enough money saved since he had invested all his money into the business, which then failed. They said they could concoct a story about how they had been pressured and coerced into testifying against me so they wouldn't be charged with perjury while under oath. However, they didn't know that I no longer needed their help. I had been recording everything they said from the moment I stepped into the house because I suspected something was off and didn't want to take any chances. So I had everything on record. Nevertheless, I told my family to send me any screenshots they had to prove they had been manipulated and lied to. Then I told them I would help them out and left. I had already seen my son, and I had more than enough evidence to file for custody again, which I did the next day with my lawyer. This time, I was prepared. The custody case is still ongoing, but one thing is for sure, I'll be able to prove that none of the things Daniel accused me of were true, and my family had been lying about everything all along. I've already played the recording, which has significantly swayed things in my favor. Daniel and his lawyer are now scrambling for evidence, and I'm enjoying the show because this is exactly what they put me through last time. Now, it's their turn. It's karma at its finest, and I couldn't be happier about it. The only downside is that they have been claiming I used them just like Daniel did, and that I had no right to record them without their consent and use it against them. But in my state, it's completely legal and admissible in court. So, I didn't understand what they were referring to until they said I had betrayed their trust by recording them. These are bold words from people who betrayed my trust first by siding with my ex-husband in the custody case. They believed that what I did was wrong because they acted out of necessity. They needed the money. But I didn't need to screw them over and put them at risk of perjury because they had already agreed to help me and testify against Daniel and his family. They have been texting me relentlessly, and it's getting harder for me to ignore. So, am I wrong for going behind my family's back and putting them at risk of being charged with perjury? Update 1. Hello, everyone! The custody case is still ongoing, and Daniel and his lawyer are trying their hardest to prove they have been telling the truth because, of course, they might face charges, and it's a felony, so they might get jail time. But that's not my concern right now, and it shouldn't have been at any point. I don't even know why I was worried about my parents when they clearly didn't worry about me when it was my turn. So, it's really just tit-for-tat right now. The comments section opened my eyes to how entitled my parents were. Anyway, I have cut ties with all of them. They can go wherever they want. I want my son to be all right and with me. I have waited long enough for this, and I'm not going to let my family and their victimization stop me. If they can sell me out for money, I don't think it's necessary for me to show any loyalty toward them. I'm done now. Update 2. The good news is that I finally got custody of my son. I don't think I've ever felt so happy in my entire life. The other good news is that my in-laws, Daniel, and my family were charged with perjury, and yes, they might go to jail for it. I bet they're regretting everything now, but I don't care about any of it because I got what I wanted. I got my son back, and that's all I had ever asked for. From what I know, Daniel is still trying to fight it and avoid jail, but I don't think it's going to work. I've already filed for a restraining order against all of them because I've been receiving very threatening text messages, and I'm 100% sure they are from these people because no one else would want to harm me. The past few weeks have been really busy and hectic, but I'm learning to slow down now. I desperately want to spend more time with my son, so I have decided to cut my work hours shorter. I've also thought about selling the house and moving to a smaller apartment to save more money. I still have a lot of work to do rebuilding my relationship with my son. It's not going to be easy because even though he's happy to be with me, he still asks about his dad and his grandparents, and I don't know what to tell him. He has mentioned a few things about them, like how he had been living with his grandparents for the most part, and his dad and my in-laws were only there for part of the day. Whenever I ask him about how it was living with his grandparents, he makes a face and says it wasn't that great because everyone would constantly be fighting. I can totally see that. It sounds like they really gave him a rough time just because they didn't want to take up the responsibility. I can imagine why they would treat a child like that, but I couldn't put it past these people. They are definitely capable of making a little boy feel bad about himself. But anyway, I don't have to worry about that because now he is with me. Update 3. Hi, everyone. I can't believe I'm back here after almost 5 years. It feels kind of unreal how different my life is right now. 5 years is a really long time, and so much has changed. The first being how much older my son is. We have a beautiful relationship right now, and after countless therapy sessions, he and I have finally become the mother and son we should have been right from the beginning. He is growing up to be a wonderful young man, and I'm sure he will turn out to be nothing like his father because I just know it in my heart. He is 9 years old now and already a perfect gentleman. I'm raising him on my own and have full custody because Daniel gave up and moved to Europe after he was released from jail. I can't say that I'm surprised. He went away with his co-worker, the one he had been cheating on me with, and now they are married. I guess he just replaced his actual biological son with the other kid. It's horrifying, but that's the kind of person he is. As for my parents and sister, they were released from jail after 6 months for good behavior. We have not kept in touch, and they did not try to reach out to me after they were out, which I am grateful for, because I don't think I would have had anything to say to them anyway. I don't have any news about my in-laws. I haven't heard from them or about them for years, and it's for the best, I think. I'm living a good life now. I have a stable job and a steady income, by God's grace. I'm still working at the company I started with, my friend's business, and it's doing pretty well. So life turned out well for me and my son, and it's more than I could have asked for. I'm truly grateful for everything.
Hello guys, it's really amazing story. What do you think? Write comment, put like and subscribe to the channel, Instagram and Discord. Good luck!